Hello, boys and girls. Thank you for joining me, Dan the Story Man, for another story. And I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is Andy Ant. And this story, it's the adventures of Andy Ant. It's the lawn mower on the loose. Oh no, lawn mower on the loose. That looks a little scary. But this is one of my favorite books that I've read a bunch of times to my friends. And let's learn something together. Dear friends, not too long ago, I met somebody who was really different, and he ended up being my best friend. Every time I'm with him, I learn something new. Maybe that's because he's a philosopher. A philosopher is a person who has really important thoughts. The very first day I met him, he taught me that you can't blame somebody else for your own mistakes. I hope you learn as much from Andy as I did, as I have. Sincerely, Joey. There's a letter that our friend Joey wrote to us, and we're gonna meet Joey and his friend Andy. Hi, my name is Joseph Tyler Johnson, but you can call me Joey. That's what my best friends call me. My best friend is probably a lot different from yours, 'cause he's an ant. His name is Andy. I just met Andy last year. You see, Andy is 9 years old, and he and his family live under the sidewalk in front of my house. His room is right next to the crack by the edge of the sidewalk. Andy says he has a room with a view, 'cause he can see what's going on outside. Andy's 14-year-old brother Parker has a much bigger room. It doesn't have windows, but Parker doesn't mind. No windows means he can play his music on his stereo as loud as he wants to. Andy's dad is a construction worker ant. He works over at the vacant lot where they are building a whole bunch of ant condominiums. Andy's mom works in downtown Grand Ant. Oh, and I almost forgot. Andy has an 11-year-old sister named Angelica. She is one of the most popular girls in ants in school. Oh, look. There's Andy on Joey's shoulder. And there's Andy's family. So cool. Andy's really nice. Let me tell you how I met Andy's aunt for the very first time. It was a special Saturday, one that I had been looking forward to for a long time. You see, it was the day I was going to sign up for junior soccer. I kind of wanted to go sign up by myself, but Dad said he didn't think I was old enough to do that, so he went with me. The school gym was crowded with other kids and their parents, and I wasn't sure which line we should stand in. There were lines for how old you are, and lines for the first letter of your first last name, and lines to sign up for uniforms. Wow, I was glad Dad was coming along. He knew just what line to stand in. If he hadn't been there, I might have stood in the wrong line all day and never gotten my uniform. Anyway, soon we were on our way back home, and I was carrying my brand new soccer uniform. As soon as we got home, I ran to my room and tried it on. Boy, it looked even better than I thought it would. There's Joey. Gonna play soccer. You like playing soccer? Or baseball? Or football? I grabbed my soccer ball and ran outside to try out the uniform. I had to make sure it really fit, you know. Just then, some other kids who had signed up that morning came by. They asked if I wanted to practice kicking the ball. They had their new uniforms on too, and we all looked pretty neat. We started running around the yard, kicking the ball. We liked to kick it really hard. Sometimes we kicked it so hard that it flew next door into Mr. Davis's yard. Once it even flew into Mr. Robinson's yard, and he lives on the other side of Mr. Davis. It seemed that the better we got at kicking the ball, the more we had to go get it out of Mr. Davis's yard. But we weren't kicking the ball very straight because it usually landed right in Mr. Davis's flower garden. Uh-oh. A soccer ball in Mr. Davis's flower garden doesn't sound good. I was afraid Mr. Davis's flower garden wouldn't look much of like a flower garden if we kept kicking the ball, so I said we should stop. But the other kids said it wouldn't really hurt the flowers. They said that by tomorrow morning the flowers would all be standing tall again. So we kept on kicking the ball and it kept on landing in the garden. Uh-oh. Do you think the flowers are going to be okay the next day? There they are, kicking the ball, having fun, but look at those flowers. The flowers weren't doing so good. After a while, the other kids had to go home. I was having such a good time, I just kept kicking the ball by myself. And that's when it happened. The ball rolled over on the sidewalk by the front steps. As I bent down to pick it up, I heard a voice ask, "You don't really think Mr. Davis's flowers will be fine by tomorrow, do you?" I looked around in surprise. I didn't see anyone. Then I looked down at the ball, and there he was, a little ant, leaning up against the crack in the sidewalk, holding a tiny soccer ball. Normally, I just squash ants, but this ant was different. He was actually talking to me. And I couldn't actually squash someone who was talking to me, could I? Well, do you? The ant repeated. Do I what? I said, hardly believing what was happening. Do you really think Mr. Davis's flowers will be fine by tomorrow? He looked at the flowers. They look ruined to me. I looked at the flowers too. No, I said, they'll be okay. The other kid said so. There is Andy Ant. He's right there. He's right under Joey's shoe right there. See how tiny he is? And Joey's talking to him. Do you think the flowers will be okay? I don't think you heard me, the ant continued. I was asking what you thought. Well, I began. At first I thought the ball would hurt the flowers. But then the kid said, "Now look, Joey," the ant said in a low voice that sounded like my dad's voice when he's doing some serious talking. "Do you always let the other kids make your decisions?" "How do you know my name?" I blurted out, hardly listening to what he was saying. He smiled at me. "I've seen you around a lot. My family and I live right here under your sidewalk. By the way," he added with a bigger smile, "my name's Andy Ant." And he reached out to shake my hand. "And you really ought to be more careful where you kick the ball." "Yeah, I guess you're right," I said, still unable to believe I was talking to an ant who actually knew me. "Say," he said, "if you're finished practicing, would you mind if a few of us practice soccer on your lawn?" "Sure, go ahead." There's Joey talking to Andy. Andy Ant. What a nice little ant. "Thanks, Joey," Andy said. Then he turned around and hollered, "Hey guys, it's okay." All of a sudden, a bunch of ants came crawling out of the crack in the sidewalk. Some of them were wearing soccer jerseys that had Grant Ant Soccer printed on them. Wow, I thought, a real ant soccer team. I watched Andy and his friends for a few minutes. I didn't understand how they could enjoy playing in the grass, especially when it was so tall, but they seemed to be having a good time. Look, there are Andy and his friends playing soccer in the grass, and Joey's watching them. So cool. After a while, I walked back to the house and went into the kitchen to get something to eat. Mom and my sister Becky were there. They thought my uniform was pretty neat. We even talked for a while about the fun I would have playing soccer. But I didn't really hear what they were saying. I just kept wondering what they would do if I told them about Andy Ant. They'd probably just think I was crazy. "Joey," your mom said, "why don't you go show Dad your uniform? He's outside mowing the front lawn." "Sure, Mom," I said. Then I froze. Mowing the front lawn? Oh my goodness. Andy and the Grand Ant soccer team were playing a ball in the front yard. I ran out the door as fast as I could, but by the time I got outside, Dad had finished with the lawn and was standing by the fence talking with Mr. Davis. I walked all around the yard looking for some trace for Andy or his friends. At first I didn't see anything, but then I looked by the sidewalk and there it was, a little soccer ball all shredded out by the lawnmower. Bum, 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 bum. Uh-oh. Soccer ball. Hope Andy's okay. Hope his friends are okay. "Joseph, would you come over here?" my dad said, but I didn't really hear him. I just continued to look around the yard, afraid of what I'd see next. "Joseph, come here, please," my dad demanded. I slowly walked toward him, still looking around. "Joseph, did you and your friends trample Mr. Davis's flower garden?" Suddenly, Dad had my full attention, and I felt my face turning red. Yes, sir. I guess we did. Would you care to explain how that happened? Dad asked, and I could tell he wasn't very pleased. Well, we were practicing kicking the ball, and it always seemed to go too far. But the other kids said the flowers would be better by tomorrow. They will be better by tomorrow, won't they? I asked, turning to Mr. Davis. Joseph, my dad's voice was really stern by now, you know the flowers won't be any better by tomorrow. I think you'd better tell Mr. Davis that you're sorry and then go to your room. I'll be there in a few minutes to talk with you. I apologized and headed for my room. There was still no sign of Andy or the soccer team, and I felt almost sick with worry. I wanted to stay outside and keep looking for my new friends, but one look from Dad, one look in Dad's direction, told me I better keep marching toward my room. Uh-oh. There's Joey talking to his dad. There's Mr. Davis with all the flat flowers. Flat flowers are not good. I stood at the window of my room, looking out at the yard. Mom always told me that God keeps his eye on the sparrows. I hope he watched out for ants too. Just then a thumping noise caught my attention. I glanced down just in time to see Andy banging on the glass of the window with both hands. I opened the window as fast as I could. Andy, are you all right? Yeah, he said, almost yelling at me. But it's no thanks to you. Why didn't you tell us your dad was going to mow the lawn? The whole Grandtown soccer team was almost mowed down. You're just lucky no one got seriously hurt, and you owe us a soccer ball. I'm sorry. I didn't know Dad was mowing the lawn. I felt a big lump in my throat. Looks like I'm in trouble with everyone. Who else are you in trouble with? Andy asked. My dad and Mr. Davis, I said, feeling pretty low. You were right. The flowers are ruined. Just then, we heard footsteps out in the hall, and Andy jumped behind the curtain. There was a knock at my door, and Dad said, Joseph, may I come in? Oh, there's Andy. There's Joey talking to him. Yes, I said. He came in, and we sat on my bed together. Son, I'm sure you know it was wrong for the kids to kick the ball into Mr. Davis's flower bed, he said. It looks as though the ball must have landed there several times. I nodded. But I want you to know, he went on, how proud I am that you told the truth. So I won't punish you if you will help Mr. Davis plant new plants in his flower garden. But in the future, I want you to remember that you have to decide for yourself what's right and what's wrong. Regardless of what other kids may say, you're the one who is responsible for what you do. Then he reached over and gave me a big hug. It's almost time for you to go to bed, he said, smiling. How about if I help you learn to kick the ball straight tomorrow? That would be great, Dad, I said, feeling a little better. Oh, look, he gave him a hug. And there he is talking to him. Looks like a good dad, He left, and I looked over at the window, remembering that Andy was there. He was peeking out from behind the curtain. Andy, I started, but he stepped out, shaking his head. Before you say anything, he said, in a low, serious philosopher-teacher voice, I want you to know that the problem with the lawnmower wasn't your fault. Your dad was right, that we each are responsible for our own actions. You see, I heard the lawnmower, and I should have known that it wouldn't have been safe to stay in the yard. I smiled at him, feeling a whole lot better. I think we both learned something very valuable, Andy went on, and I nodded. You're right, I said. I learned that I'm going to do what's right, no matter what someone else says. And I learned that it's important to tell the truth when you do mess up. Pretty good, Andy said, just like a teacher does when you give the right answer in school. There's Joey talking to Andy all the way down there. See him? He's peeking out. I smiled at him and remembered something else I'd learned that day. I started to tell Andy, but he was busy talking about responsibility and why it's so important, so I decided not to bother him. All the same, I felt warm inside because I'd learned that my dad is a really neat guy to have around. You know, for things like helping you to find the right line to stand in and for being proud of you. And I was looking forward to tomorrow, learning how to kick the ball right. I knew it was going to be a good day. There's Andy and Joey. How nice. Ooh, and look, there's a picture of Andy's family and Joey's family. Isn't that nice? There's a proverb that says, truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. So it's good to tell the truth and not listen to people that are lying to us. And there's Joey's neighborhood, his school, and his house. And there's Andy's house right at the bottom, down at the bottom there down here. Right down there. Yeah, he lives in the sidewalk. Thank you for joining me, Dan the Story Man, for another story, one of my favorite about Andy Ant and the lawnmower on the loose. Woo! Be careful of lawnmowers. And hey, ants can be our friends, right? Thank you for joining me, Dan the Story Man, for another story. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Toodaloo, ta-ta, and have a great day. Bye-bye. See you later. Bye-bye.